My name's Alex, I'm 30 years old, and for most of my life I thought loyalty meant sacrifice. Growing up in a house where love had a scoreboard and my name never made the highlight reel taught me early how to disappear quietly. My older brother Ryan was the pride and joy straight A's varsity jacket golden boy aura. Me, I was the afterthought. The kid who got the hand-me-downs and the hand-me-nots. My parents played favorites like it was a professional sport. Ryan got the cheers, I got the chores, and I told myself it was fine. That if I worked harder, stayed kind, and helped enough, they'd notice me one day. Spoiler, they didn't, but I didn't let bitterness rot me. I worked, I studied, I built a graphic design business from the ground up. Nothing fancy, just steady clients, clean income, a modest home I owned outright, and enough left over to help my family. Because of course I helped. It started with small stuff, a $50 gas top-up for Dad, a few hundred to cover Ryan's surprise vet bill for a dog he wasn't even supposed to have in his apartment. Grocery money for Mom when prices soared. Then it became monthly, predictable, routine. The ask came like clockwork wrapped in guilt or casual entitlement, but I didn't mind at first. This year I wanted just one thing, one weekend, one flicker of feeling seen. So I rented a cozy cottage by the lake. Not a resort, not a luxury villa, just a clean, peaceful spot with pine trees, birdsong, and a fire pit. Booked it months in advance, sent out invites, bought their favorite drinks and snacks, even set up a playlist based on everyone's tastes. Yeah, I went full Pinterest. It was supposed to be for my 30th birthday. I covered the gas, offered to drive, made it absurdly easy. Everyone said yes, wouldn't miss it, sounds great, looking forward to it. I arrived the night before to get everything ready. Welcome notes on each pillow. String lights hung across the porch. A cooler full of soda and sparkling water. Even baked cookies, Mom's favorite recipe, just a little overbaked on purpose because that's how she likes them. The morning of my birthday, I was up at 7. Nervous, excited. I grilled vegetables, made sangria, cleaned the dock chairs twice. By noon, nothing. By 3, still nothing. At 5, I tried calling, no answer. At 8, I sat on the porch watching the lake turn gold under the sunset. 6 untouched burgers in the fridge. A cake that said Happy 30. Alex in neat blue frosting slightly smudged from the drive. No candles, no music, just a birthday spent alone in a place I'd imagined filled with laughter. And you know what hurt most? Not the silence. The silence I was used to. It was realizing none of them had even lied. No flat tire excuse, no we're stuck in traffic, not even a fake emergency, just nothing. 2 days later I opened Instagram. I don't know why I did it, some masochistic habit, I guess. First post on my feed, Ryan's. Family weekend up north, nothing like unplugging with your people. There they were, on a dock, holding grilled corn, wearing matching t-shirts, yes, matching. In the background, Mom's laugh. Dad's signature camping mug. Even the family dog Murphy wearing a bandana. It wasn't the lake I booked. It was the opposite direction. Same weekend. Different family trip. No tag, no mention of me, not even a stray wish Alex was here. They hadn't forgotten me. They had chosen not to come. Not just skipped the trip. Not just missed the invite. They created a new one without me. Somewhere along the line, they'd drawn a circle around what family meant, and I wasn't inside it. I stared at that post until my screen dimmed, and I felt nothing. That scared me more than if I'd felt rage or heartbreak. I wasn't surprised. That's how numb you get when the people who are supposed to love you teach you instead how to be useful. But this time I wasn't going to fix it. I wasn't going to send a saw your post, hope it was fun. I wasn't going to pretend it was okay. I made 3 calls that night. First, Ryan's auto loan. I was still listed as the co-signer for the temporary lease he got when his credit tanked. I'd been covering it for 6 months. I called the lender, showed the missed payments removed to myself. Let them deal with him directly. Second, Dad's fishing boat insurance. He'd casually mentioned not being able to afford the premiums just until summer. I'd been paying it. I canceled the auto pay. Third, Mom's credit card. I'd been making $500 on monthly payments on her high-interest debt. No more. I didn't send a message. I didn't rant. I just stopped. When the calls started pouring in, I let them ring. That weekend, while they scrambled to figure out why their payments bounced, I sat by the lake and finished my cake. Alone. Still no candles. Just peace. That's where it began. They noticed the silence faster than I expected. By Monday afternoon, I had 3 missed calls from Mom, 2 from Dad, and a text from Ryan that just said, "Hey, something up. Like this was some mild inconvenience, a glitch in the family system they assumed I'd fix quietly, like always." I didn't answer. I didn't reply. I didn't owe them a performance. By Tuesday morning, Mom sent a longer message. "Alex, I noticed the payment didn't go through this month. Is everything okay with your account? Not happy birthday? Not... Sorry we missed the weekend. Just concern for the payment. The financial IV drip I'd apparently been hooked up to without ever consenting." That hit different. For years, I'd convinced myself they just didn't know how to express gratitude, that maybe our family was just awkward about feelings, but now it was crystal clear. They didn't forget me. They expected me, like rent, like utilities, like some household subscription that never stops delivering until the credit card expires. I gave it another day, let the tension sit. I imagined the group chat, mom panicking, dad annoyed, Ryan probably shrugging. Maybe they thought I was just being sensitive again. Maybe they assumed I'd cool off and call the way I always did. But I wasn't cooling off. I wasn't boiling either. I was still. And that stillness, that was new. Wednesday night, Ryan tried again. Hey, you free to talk? I think there's been a misunderstanding. We didn't mean to hurt you. I stared at that message like it came from a stranger. A misunderstanding, as if I'd tripped over my own emotions and mistaken neglect for a party invite. I didn't respond. Instead, I started going through old emails and paperwork. I wasn't looking for revenge, I was looking for freedom. 3 years ago, Ryan had asked me to help him start a small side business, something about outdoor gear and consulting. He didn't have the credit or capital to register the LLC, so he begged me to put it in my name. Just the paperwork, he'd said. I'll handle everything else. Spoiler, he didn't. He used the account sporadically, made a few hundred here and there, and then let it collect dust. Until apparently he didn't. Because this January, I'd started getting odd notifications. Low balance alerts, transaction summaries for things I never approved, office chairs domain renewals, even a $2,000 brand marketing package from some sketchy agency. I assumed he was using it but didn't push. I didn't want to cause drama. But now it was time to pull the thread. Thursday morning, I called the state registry, asked what I needed to do to formally remove my name. They gave me the list. I completed the steps. By the end of the day, the business account was frozen. I also sent a copy of the updated paperwork to the credit bureau and to the financial institution that had issued a $10,000 credit line tied to the LLC without my knowledge. That night I got a call, Ryan. I let it ring. He left a voicemail. Dude, what's going on? I tried logging into the account and it's locked. You didn't have to go nuclear? Can we just talk? I didn't even listen to the rest. I deleted it. Friday morning I got an email from Mom. Subject line, this isn't like you, Body. We know you're upset, but hurting us won't fix anything. Please call. I laughed out loud, not because it was funny, but because it was predictable. The sudden shift from silence to guilt. Like skipping chapters in a book and still expecting to understand the plot. And here's the part that might sound cold. I didn't feel bad. Not even a flicker of regret. Because every action I took was a reaction to years of being the one holding the fragile center of our family together, while they acted like I was just part of the scenery. They left me out. On purpose, not by accident, not by scheduling conflict. They planned around me. Took the time to coordinate outfits and menu choices and hashtags and never once thought, hey, maybe Alex would want to be there. And now that the money stopped, the silence broke them faster than any confrontation could have. That said everything. Over the weekend, Dad finally reached out. No emojis, no warm-up, just, can you at least make the boat payment this month? It's due Monday. That was the moment it clicked. He still didn't understand. None of them did. They thought this was temporary, a tantrum. That if they waited long enough, I'd reset like I always had. What they didn't realize was this wasn't a pause, it was a full stop. Sunday evening, I sat on the same dock where I'd spent my birthday. This time it was quieter, the wind softer. I had a cup of tea, a blanket, and a book I barely touched. Because my mind kept looping one thought, they don't see me unless they need me. And I was finally done being invisible until I became useful again. So I made one final move. I opened a new account, changed all my business finances to a fresh, clean slate. No more shared anything, no cosigns, no joint access. Just me and my own name on everything. I even got a new email domain, one they didn't know. When Monday rolled around and Dad's boat payment defaulted, the calls started again. This time they weren't curious or cautious, they were furious. I ignored them. Because the truth is, they weren't mad I disappeared. They were mad I stopped serving a purpose. Tuesday morning brought another voicemail, this time from Ryan's wife. Her voice was sugar-coated but tight, like someone trying very hard to stay polite. Hey, Alex, I don't want to get involved, but things are a little tense right now. Ryan's stressed. He's saying the bank's threatening collections. I know you've always been the peacemaker, so maybe just talk to him, peacemaker. I paused the message right there. That word used to feel flattering. Now it felt like a leash. What they really meant was the fixer, the cleaner. The one who calms everyone down after they light up the fire. I didn't call her back. That afternoon, I got a knock on my door. No heads up, no text. Just the sound of knuckles against wood and a pause that felt way too familiar. I checked the peephole. It was Mom. Standing there in a beige coat with her purse clutched in both hands like she wasn't sure if this was a visit or a plea. I opened the door halfway. No hug, no smile. Just, what's going on, Alex? I stepped back and let her in, but I didn't say much. I waited. She walked to the kitchen, glanced around like she was cataloging everything that had changed since she last visited, which was 2 years ago, by the way. Your brother's been calling you non-stop, she said, not looking at me. He's panicking about that business account. And your dad's furious about the boat insurance. He says you froze the policy. I raised an eyebrow, but still didn't speak. Let her keep going. She sighed. Look, I know the birthday thing hurt your feelings. It was last minute. Ryan planned that other trip kind of spontaneously. He didn't mean to exclude you. That word again. Spontaneous. The lie they all told themselves to avoid taking responsibility. A trip with matching shirts and coordinated meals is about as spontaneous as a wedding. I finally spoke. Did you even know it was my birthday, Ma? She blinked, clearly caught off guard. Of course I did, she said, but it sounded rehearsed. We just thought maybe you needed some space. I laughed short and dry from what the one thing I asked for this year. One weekend I didn't yell, didn't raise my voice, but the silence that followed landed louder than any shout could. She looked down. I think you're overreacting. It wasn't personal. That's the problem, I said. It never is. You all just float past the damage like it's background noise. I've been helping pay your mortgage for 3 years and you never even asked how I was doing. You never thought maybe I needed help or wanted to feel included. You all just take. Quietly, consistently. She didn't deny it. She just said, we're your family, Alex. That line used to sting. Now it just felt like manipulation wrapped in tradition. Yeah, I replied. And I've been acting like it, but I'm not doing it anymore. She finally looked me in the eyes. So what, this is payback? No, I said calmly. This is a reset. She left 10 minutes later. No hug, no parting words. Just the kind of exit that said she didn't know how to win this argument without a guilt trip. Later that evening, Ryan texted again. Long paragraph this time. Lots of we didn't mean it like that, and you're being really unfair, followed by the classic closer, you've always been the strong one, Alex. Don't let this break the family. That made me pause, not because it softened me, but because of the irony. They called me strong when I was bending, when I was swallowing every slight and smoothing every edge. But the second I stood tall, suddenly I was difficult, selfish, dramatic. By Friday, the dominoes were still falling. The bank formally removed my name from Ryan's LLC file. A lien was placed on the account. Dad's boat insurance was canceled for non-payment. And Mom's credit card company started sending past due notices. None of it surprised me. What did surprise me was how quiet they all got. Like maybe finally the silence I'd endured was echoing back at them. But I wasn't done yet. There was one more loose thread. A joint savings account Mom and I had opened years ago, back when she was talking about retiring early. It was meant for emergencies, just until she got on her feet. I'd deposited over $20,000 into that account over 4 years. Quietly. No strings, no demands. I never even checked the balance, just kept adding to it thinking I was doing something good. On Saturday I did check. The balance $312. I stared at the screen for a long time. There hadn't been a single deposit from her since the year it opened. But there had been withdrawals, furniture, jewelry, a 2-week vacation she took with her sister. All those times she'd said she was struggling, I'd believed her. All those moments I skipped buying myself things because Mom needs it more, I thought I was helping. Turns out I was just funding comfort I never got to share. That night I closed the account, transferred what little was left. Then I sat down and made a list. A full inventory of every dollar I'd sent, every loan I never got back, every bill I'd paid without recognition. The total just under $94,000. No wonder they wanted me to let it go. The next morning I took a long walk. I needed air. Clarity. Not anger, just distance. I passed the park near my place and watched 2 kids build something out of sticks. I remembered doing that with Ryan once, back when we were still kids, and he hadn't yet figured out how to let me take the blame for everything that went wrong. It made me sad, not because I missed him, but because I missed the version of him I thought might come back one day. The brother who used to stick up for me, not the one who pretended I didn't exist when it mattered. When I got home, I had a letter in my mailbox. Handwritten. From Dad. 5 pages, a mixture of blame and pleading. He accused me of abandoning the family when things got hard. Said he never asked for help but appreciated everything I'd done. Then he added, "If you stop now, you're just proving you were doing it for praise, not love." That was the moment I realized he didn't get it. They all thought this was about recognition, about me wanting a thank you, but it was never that simple. I just wanted to matter. And now I did. Not to them, but to myself. I didn't reply to Dad's letter, not because I had nothing to say, but because I had finally realized silence said more than any perfectly worded response. Every time I tried to explain myself before it had turned into a debate, a tug of war where I was always the one pulling from both ends trying to keep the rope from snapping. But not anymore. I was done managing their feelings while mine collected dust. The following week, I started making small changes in my life. Not dramatic ones, just quiet shifts that felt like reclaiming pieces of myself. I updated all my business contacts with my new email. Changed my number, not out of spite but peace. If they wanted to reach me, they'd have to go through a door they no longer had the keys to. I went through my apartment and finally threw out the old gifts they'd given me, stuff chosen with obligation, not thought. A cracked photo frame, a generic tie, a pair of headphones still sealed in plastic. I never liked how they made me feel like an afterthought, so I stopped keeping physical reminders of that truth. It wasn't a purge, it was a return to balance. By midweek, Ryan posted a cryptic status on Facebook. Funny how some people forget where they came from. The comment section lit up full of his friends offering support and vague sympathy. I didn't comment, didn't even feel anger, just a strange sense of detachment. Watching him play victim in a story he wrote was like watching a rerun of a show I used to love but had long outgrown. Later that night, I received a message from someone I hadn't heard from in years, my cousin Nina. We'd grown up close but drifted apart when I moved for college and she moved out of the country. Her message read, "Just saw Ryan's post. I've been catching up on everything. I don't know the full story, but I do know you've always been the most selfless person in that family. Whatever you're doing now, I hope it's for you." I stared at that message for a long time. It wasn't dramatic, wasn't a side, just a small reminder that someone had seen me, really seen me. And it was enough to remind me that I hadn't imagined all those years of quiet effort. The next few days were calm, too calm, and that's when I knew the storm was regrouping. Saturday afternoon, a letter arrived from a lawyer, not threatening but formal. A notice from the credit union regarding the small business loan attached to Ryan's now frozen LLC. They were informing me of his default, which I already knew about, and officially releasing me from liability following my withdrawal. At the bottom, though, was the note, "Remaining balance owed by primary owner will be pursued via collections." I folded the letter neatly and set it aside. Not out of pettiness, just as a bookmark in the story that was no longer mine to carry. That evening, I went for a drive. No destination, just open road in my thoughts. I passed familiar streets, our old church, Ryan's high school, the diner Dad used to take us to when money was tight, but he still wanted to make Saturday breakfast feel special. These weren't bad memories, but they were wrapped in layers of sadness now. I used to think the past was something I had to protect at all costs. Now I knew it was something I could respect without continuing to sacrifice my future for it. Sunday morning, I got another visit. This time it was Ryan. No text, no warning. Just him on my doorstep, arms crossed, eyes tired, face harder than I remembered. I opened the door but didn't invite him in. "Can we talk?" he asked. I stepped out and closed the door behind me. He stood there for a second like he was searching for the right tone, the version of himself that might still work on me. "Look, man, I know you're mad. I get it. But you didn't have to go behind my back and wreck everything." I stared at him calm. "I didn't go behind your back. You left the door wide open. I just stepped out." His jaw clenched. "You know this affects more than just me, right? I've got a family. You could have at least given me a heads up." That part made me laugh just a little. Like the heads up you gave me before planning that trip without me. Before dragging my name into a loan you never paid back, before turning a joint savings account into your personal ATM. He shifted, his weight guilt flashing across his face for just a second. "I didn't think it would go that far." "No, Ryan," I said, my voice steady. "You didn't think at all." He shook his head. "So what, you're cutting us off just like that?" I let the words hang between us. "No, I'm cutting myself loose." He looked stunned, like the words didn't make sense. Like I wasn't allowed to choose myself. Then he said something that confirmed everything. "You're always the one who keeps things together, Alex. If you stop, everything falls apart." And there it was. The truth. I wasn't family to them, I was infrastructure. I stepped back toward the door. Then maybe it needs to fall apart. I closed the door slowly, not to make a point, just to draw a line. The next morning, I woke up without a single message. It was eerie, like they'd finally realized that their leverage, emotional or financial, was gone. That day, I called my bank and set up something I should have done years ago, a financial advisor. We went over my income, my savings, my goals. He asked me what I was planning for the next 5 years. I paused, then said, peace, just peace. He smiled and said, that was a solid place to start. Weeks passed, not fast, not slow, just steady, like the tide. And for the first time in years, nothing was crashing into me. No late night calls, no financial fires, no sudden request to drop everything and solve something someone else broke. The silence wasn't empty. It was full of breath, full of room to think. I started waking up without dread, going to bed without replaying a list of family needs like a to-do list running in my head. My calendar finally had space for me. The fallout, though, it kept unfolding without me. Ryan's business collapsed within the month. Apparently, the collections hit his personal credit hard and one of his vendors pulled out. I knew this because a former colleague of his, someone I'd met once during a barbecue years ago, reached out with a message. Did you really walk away from your brother's business? I heard he's blaming you for everything. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The truth had already stepped into the room long before I left it. Then came the message from Dad. Not a voicemail, not a letter. A single line in a text, you've made your point. I stared at it for a while. There was no curiosity, no reflection, just defeat coated in pride. And I felt nothing, no urge to fix, no reflex to call, just stillness. Mom, on the other hand, held out longer. She tried a few different approaches. First, the guilt texts about how the house was in danger, how the bank wouldn't wait, how she was so scared she might lose everything. Then came the nostalgia photos from when I was little birthday cakes. I barely remembered notes about better days. I didn't reply. Not because I didn't care, but because caring had to start looking different. I wasn't going to save a home that never made me feel like I belonged in it. One morning I opened my inbox and saw a new message. Subject line from one adult to another. It was from Julia, Ryan's wife. I hesitated, then clicked. She wrote, I know this probably isn't welcome, but I wanted to say something directly. I don't blame you for what's happened. I've watched you help this family more than anyone else, and I know it's been taken for granted. Ryan is a good man, but he's never had to carry what you have. And that imbalance, well, it's catching up to us all. I'm not asking for anything. I just thought you should know someone sees it. I read that message twice, 3 times. It was the first time in months that someone in that orbit acknowledged the truth without spin. No begging, no blame, just quiet honesty. I didn't reply right away, but it stayed with me. Around the same time, I started doing something I hadn't done in years, sketching. It had been my first love long before I built the design business. I used to draw everywhere, napkins, notebooks, cafe receipts. But over the years, it faded under the weight of responsibility. Now, with time and space cleared, it came back like a memory that had just been waiting for me to return. One Saturday, I packed up my things and drove back to the lake house. The same one I'd booked for my 30th birthday, the one no one came to. But this time, I wasn't expecting anyone. I brought a sketchbook, a few groceries, and nothing else. When I arrived, the dock looked exactly the same, still clean, quiet. The lights I'd strung back then were gone now, replaced by new ones. But the sun set the same way, and I grilled myself dinner. Not for anyone else, just for me. I sat by the water, sipping tea, drawing what I saw. And when the breeze picked up, I didn't shiver. I let it pass through me. It didn't feel like loss anymore. It felt like release. That night, I slept better than I had in years. No buzzing phone, no alarms. Just the sound of leaves shifting and the lake breathing. The next morning, I found an old voicemail I'd forgotten to delete. From Mom. The last one. I played it out of curiosity more than anything. Her voice cracked halfway through. I don't understand why you're doing this. I know we've made mistakes, but cutting us off like this, it feels cruel. We're family. We're supposed to forgive. I let the message end, then sat with it. Not angry, not bitter, just still. Forgiveness, that word. They kept using it like it was a door I had to walk through without them ever fixing what made me leave in the first place. Like, I was obligated to reset the story even if they never rewrote their roles, but I wasn't interested in empty forgiveness. I was interested in change. Real, earned, consistent change. Not just words, not just voicemails and old photos. Later that day, I wrote back to Julia, just one line. Thank you for seeing what no one else would admit. She replied instantly, I meant every word. That was it. No plan to reconnect, no big reconciliation arc, just a small moment of clarity in a family full of fog. I started making new traditions. Sunday hikes, Friday dinners with friends who asked how I was doing without also asking for a favor. I hosted a small birthday celebration for a neighbor's kid. watched movies I'd always skipped because someone else didn't like them. I even got a plant, kept it alive. That felt like progress. What surprised me most wasn't the quiet. It was how easy it became to let go of being the family's foundation. When I stepped away, they didn't crumble. They fractured. That was never about me. That was about them never learning to stand on their own. I used to think my distance would destroy them. But now I saw the truth. My absence just revealed what they refused to see when I was there. I wasn't punishing them. I was freeing myself. It's been 3 months since the silence began. Not the kind that isolates you, but the kind that shields you. I don't miss the noise. I don't miss the obligation masked as tradition. And I definitely don't miss the way I used to shrink myself to fit into a family that only saw my worth when it was convenient. Somewhere along the line, I stopped asking for them to see me. I started seeing myself. There were no big explosions, no dramatic confrontations or teary confessions, just distance. Just space where their demands used to be. And in that space, something else grew. Peace, yes, but also understanding. I began to see how tangled everything had been, how deeply I'd tied my identity to being needed instead of being loved. They called me strong because I never broke. But the truth is, I bent so far I forgot what standing straight felt like. One morning I got a letter in the mail, not typed, handwritten, from Mom. The envelope had a smudge on it like it had been handled too many times. Inside, the writing was uneven, a little shaky. Alex, it began. I don't expect you to forgive me right away. I don't expect anything, actually, but I want you to know I finally understand what you've been carrying. I thought we were leaning on you out of trust, not taking advantage. But now I see we blurred that line a long time ago. I'm sorry. Not for the payments. For the forgetting. For the way we treated you like a fixture, not a person. I know it doesn't fix things, but I miss you. And I hope someday we talk again. Not because you owe us anything, but because maybe finally we can listen. I folded the letter and set it on the windowsill. Didn't rush to reply. Didn't toss it either. I let it sit there like a seed. Maybe it'll grow into something. Maybe not. But the choice was finally mine. 1 week later, I got a voicemail from Dad. Short, gruff as always. But it was different this time. I was wrong, he said. That was it. 3 words I never thought I'd hear. He didn't explain or qualify or spin it. Just said what needed saying and left the rest up to me. Ryan didn't reach out again, not directly, but a mutual friend mentioned he was going through it. Credit issues, business lost, marriage strained. I felt bad. Not out of guilt. Out of humanity. I didn't root for his fall. I just refused to keep catching him every time he tripped over his own choices. Life started to take on new shape. Not bigger, not louder, just real. I got a dog, named him Birch. He's clumsy and loyal and has no idea what I gave up to make space for peace, but he guards it anyway. I started cooking more, reading more, saying no without explaining myself. I no longer flinch when someone says family like it's a promise. I know now it's a choice, and choices come with consequences, just like silence does. One evening, I went back to the lake house. Just for a night, I brought Birch. Packed light, no expectations. I stood on the same dock where I once sat with a cake no one came to share. The water still shimmered the same way. The trees still leaned in like they were listening. But something was different. This time I wasn't waiting. I didn't bring a cake, didn't set up decorations, just brought myself, and that was enough. I sat with my feet dangling over the edge and watched the sky bleed orange into purple. Birch curled up next to me and sighed like even he understood that this wasn't sadness anymore. This was closure. In that moment, I thought about everything I used to do to earn a seat at a table that always had room for others, but not for me. I thought about every time I loaned money I couldn't afford, hoping it would buy me belonging. Every holiday I spent pretending. Every birthday I planned for people who never showed up. And then I thought about now. About the quiet. About the people in my life who don't need to be paid to stay close. About the version of me that's no longer exhausted by trying to keep the peace in a war I never started. I don't know if I'll ever fully reconcile with my family. Maybe one day we'll talk. Maybe we won't. But what I do know is that I don't need them to understand in order to heal. That realization that freedom wasn't something they gave me. It was something I had to claim. Before I left the lake house that night, I stood up, walked to the edge of the dock, and whispered, "Thank you for not showing up." Not out of bitterness, but because that moment, the one they skipped, gave me the clearest picture of what I'd been to them. And without it, I might still be stuck. As the wind picked up and the stars began to cut through the dusk, I packed my things. Birch jumped into the car like he knew it was time to go. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. Because for the first time in 30 years, I wasn't walking away from them. I was walking toward myself. And that I've learned is what freedom really feels like. Story 2. I'm 32 years old and my name is Jake. I considered my relationship with my parents to be fairly stable, if not ideal, until recently. Although I've always known they gave preference to my younger brother Ethan, I never imagined it would go as far as it did. The golden child has always been Ethan. It was clear to me as a child that he got away with things I couldn't. My parents had a million reasons ready for him when he made a mistake, and he was praised for the very least. He is only a young man. He is resolving the situation. Jake, you have to be patient with him. In the meantime, I was supposed to be the mature one, the responsible one, and the one who set an example, and I did. I succeeded after putting in a lot of effort in school and landing a respectable job. Ethan? Not at all. He continues to switch jobs at the age of 28, always learning new things. He has always lived with my parents for free. However, they act as though he has it far worse than I ever did. Whenever I attempted to draw attention to the unfairness, the same response was given to me. You're independent, Jake. Ethan needs us more than you do. That was the rationale behind everything they did. If Ethan received the newest gaming console for his birthday and I received a cheap one, you make a good living, Jake. You can now purchase it on your own. Ethan is simply not as responsible as you if I had to assist with household chores while he was lounging on the couch. If they had to pay to have their car fixed after Ethan damaged it. However, I had to use my own funds to purchase my first car. Jake, you can manage it. And I swallowed it for years. I gave it up. It wasn't worth fighting over, I told myself. Then I learned of the will. For years I had been providing financial support to my parents, helping to pay for home repairs, paying a portion of their mortgage, and even helping with their medical expenses. I never did it with any expectation of compensation. I wanted to make sure they were taken care of because they were my parents. However, I discovered one day, quite by chance, that they had bequeathed to Ethan everything in the house, the savings, their possessions, everything. I was there to assist them with some paperwork when it happened. I looked absently at the folder my mom had left on the kitchen table while she went to answer a phone. I saw my name, or rather the lack of it at that moment. The only inheritor named was Ethan. When my mother returned, I inquired about it. I wasn't yet furious. All I wanted to do was comprehend. But rather than displaying remorse or guilt, she pretended it didn't matter. Oh, that, she said dismissively, waving a hand. We simply reasoned that it made the most sense. Ethan, you have a steady life and a good job. He's not as fortunate, though. He will require the assistance more than you will. What I was hearing was unbelievable. I therefore received nothing because I put in a lot of effort and created a secure life, despite all that I have done for you. She scowled at me as if I were being irrational. Jake, you don't need it. It's only financial. You'll be all right. Something broke inside of me. I had been their safety net for years. I had given and given. And the time I paused to wonder if I was even important. I was tossed aside like a spoiled child having a fit. I immediately understood that to them, I was merely a resource, someone they could turn to in times of need, but never someone they genuinely valued. I decided, as a result, I stopped covering their expenses. Their mortgage was no longer covered by me. I stopped giving them money for unforeseen costs like groceries or repairs. They certainly didn't need my financial assistance if they didn't value me enough to include me in their will. They quickly came to terms with reality. They remained silent at first. They might have assumed I was simply busy, or that I had overlooked. However, a month or so later, my mother texted me. No salutations, no bad idle chatter. All that is due is the rent. That was it. No, how are you? No. I hope all is well with you. Only a request, as if I were their own ATM. I spent a lot of time looking at the message, experiencing a range of feelings. Disappointment, hurt, and rage. Finally, I responded. I didn't shout. I refrained from using profanity. I didn't plead with them to realize their unfairness. I simply responded with, Ethan will take care of it, I'm sure. All I said was that. No justification, no dispute. Just a straightforward assertion. After that, I put my phone away and carried on with my day. The backlash started quickly after that. My mom called me less than an hour later and my phone buzzed once more. I chose to ignore it. Then another. And yet another. At last a text. Answer the phone, Jake. This isn't amusing. I left it alone. Whatever guilt trip they were going to put me on, I wasn't in the mood to entertain it. However, I received exactly what I had anticipated when I eventually checked my voicemail. Mom's disappointment was evident in her voice. I'm not sure what's gotten into you, Jake, but this is incredibly self-centered. I've always tried my hardest for you, as has your father. Do you truly want to be a son like this? When we need you, are you ignoring us? Ethan is currently unable to provide assistance. He's having trouble. We assumed you would comprehend that. Give me a call back. I didn't. It took me several hours to receive the subsequent message which came from my father. I knew my mom must have gotten him involved because he didn't often text me. We must speak, Jake. This is a serious matter. Give your mom a call. I chose to ignore it nonetheless, and I experienced something I had never experienced in years. Command. I had acted the part of the responsible son for so long, the one who never asked for anything. But the instant I said no to being used, they went crazy. Then Ethan became involved as I had anticipated. What's wrong with you, dude? Are you freaking out, Mom and Dad? Simply make your regular rent payment. How come you're being so tough? That nearly made me laugh, as usual, as though providing a roof over their heads was my responsibility, as if I was automatically given more responsibility because he was their favorite. When I did answer, I didn't say much. It's not my issue. It was answered in a matter of seconds. What the devil does that mean? Literally, you can afford it. Quit being a jerk. I put my phone down without receiving a response. The speed at which the entitlement surfaced was astounding. No. Hello, how are you? No. I had no idea how much assistance you have been providing. Just instant rage that I wasn't helping them keep the ship afloat. I anticipated receiving more texts and possibly some irate voicemails. However, what transpired next caught me off guard. My aunt sent me a message when I woke up the following day, the sister of my mother. Hello, dear. Your mother just called me crying. She claims that they could lose the house if you don't assist them. What's happening? I believed that you two were close. I let out a sigh. The flying monkeys had come, of course. I inhaled deeply before answering. I appreciate you checking in, Lisa. I would love to explain, but I believe you should ask Mom why she expected me to pay their bills while excluding me entirely from the wall. Tell me what she has to say. She was silent for a long moment before answering. Hold on. What? I grinned. I decided to take a step back and observe the consequences after that, because my parents and I were no longer the only ones involved. The rest of the family would soon learn the truth about what had been going on behind closed doors. Additionally, I suspected that my parents' mom would not approve. At least it didn't text me back right away, so I assumed she was either processing what I had said or trying to get my mom to tell me the whole story. In any case, I had no intention of pursuing her for a reply. Rather, I went about my day relishing the unique tranquility that came from not having to answer to my parents. However, that tranquility was short-lived. My phone came back to life in the afternoon. It was my mother this time. How could you tell Lisa that it's not her business? This is a family issue. There wasn't, and you're ruining our reputation. We apologize. Let's discuss this. No, I was unaware of how unjust this was to you. Just sheer indignation that someone else was now questioning what they had done. I didn't answer for a few minutes. As soon as you pulled her into it, it became her business. Perhaps you shouldn't have done it if you don't want anyone to know what you did. That cut her off, for now anyway. Ethan then added another comment. At this moment, Mom is actually crying. Does that make you feel good? Is it satisfying to bring your own mother to tears? I stared at the text, shaking my head. The manipulation was so blatant, it was almost funny. Nearly. If she's crying, it's because she's realizing that actions have consequences, not my problem. I sent it in this time. Ethan didn't respond right away. Maybe he was running back to Mom and Dad, feeding them my words so they could all sit together and fume about how awful I was. Meanwhile, I was starting to realize just how much weight had been lifted off my shoulders. For years, I had been the responsible one, the dependable one, the one who picked up the slack when my parents coddled Ethan and let him skate through life without consequences. And what did I get for it? Nothing. Not even an acknowledgement in their will. I sacrificed vacations, nights out, even put off buying a home of my own because I was always helping them out and they never once appreciated it. I was done. A few hours passed and then my phone rang again. This time I answered because it was Aunt Lisa. Hey, I said, keeping my voice neutral. Hey Jake, she said, and I could tell from her tone that she was treading carefully. I just got off the phone with your mom. I waited, letting her continue. She told me. Well, she told me a very different version of what's going on. I almost laughed. I'll guess. She made it sound like I'm some selfish, greedy son who suddenly decided to abandon them for no reason. There was a pause and then a quiet sigh. More or less. I leaned back in my chair. Did she mention that I've been covering their bills for years, or that they left me out of the wool entirely while giving Ethan everything? One more pause. No, she left that part out. Of course she did. Well, I said, keeping my tone even. That's what happened. Lisa sighed again. Jake, I had no idea. I really didn't. And honestly, I don't blame you one bit. That surprised me. Really, of course. Look, I love your mom. She's my sister. But she's always played favorites with Ethan. And I hate to say it, but I think she just assumed you'd always be there to clean up their messes. That you would never say no. Well, I said she assumed wrong. Lisa was quiet for a moment. Then she said, so what now? I exhaled slowly. Now they figure it out on their own. I'm done being their safety net. Lisa didn't argue. In fact, she let out a dry little chuckle. Honestly, good for you. We talked for a few more minutes, and before we hung up, Lisa said something that stuck with me. I have a feeling this isn't over. They're going to try something. Be careful. Jake. She wasn't mistaken because Ethan texted me again later that night. All right, go ahead and behave selfishly if you want to. Just when you realize you made a mistake, don't go back and fix it. After a moment of staring at the message, I shook my head. Stupid, I hadn't made any mistakes at all. If anything, I was finally getting something right for the first time in years. But one thing was very clear from Ethan's text. They had no intention of giving up so easily. And a part of me was practically anticipating their next move. My front door was being pounded when I woke up the following morning. It wasn't a courteous knock, nor was it impatient. There was a pounding like this that gave you the impression that someone was going to smash the door. Before I even looked at the people for a moment, I knew who it was. I considered simply ignoring it and letting them feel free to stand there. However, I had a feeling that they would continue to bang until the neighbors complained if I didn't respond. I sighed and pushed the door open. My parents and Ethan were indeed present. Mom's face was pinched with disapproval and her arms were crossed. When she was in full attack mode, Dad stood just behind her as he always did. Ethan, too. Ethan, however, was wearing the same arrogant, smug look he always had when he believed that he was in charge of something. I rested my weight on the doorframe. Crossed arms. Whoa, this is not what was expected. Mom wasted no time. We must speak, Jake. I gave a little laugh. You want to talk now? You weren't writing me out of the well at the time. Not when you expected me to continue providing for Ethan and paying your bills. All of a sudden, it is urgent. Dad sighed as if I were being tough son. Could we enter? I shook my head after acting as though I had given it some thought. No, I don't believe that. This is where we can have this discussion. Ethan laughed. Are you serious? Extremely serious, Mom sighed. Obviously not used to having her desires ignored. You're acting like a kid, Jake. Adolescent? I raised an eyebrow and repeated. Coming from the people who unexpectedly showed up at my house and beat on my door like debt collectors, that's rich. Mom's face flushed, but she inhaled deeply to try to calm herself. She switched to what I referred to as her guilt trip voice and said, Listen. We are aware of your distress. We recognize that you feel excluded, but you need to take a more logical approach to this. In fact, I laughed. Logically. After what you did, do you want to discuss rationality, Dad, who had been quiet until now, made the decision to speak up? You're doing good for yourself, son. You lead a stable life and have a good job. Ethan. He needs more assistance then. I looked over at Ethan, who was still standing with his arms folded as if this had never happened to him. I reiterated that he needs more assistance. He is 30 years old. He is not a child. While I had to earn everything I have, he has been given every advantage. You decided that he should inherit everything while I should receive nothing after all of that. Ethan grinned. You didn't fight for it, and that's not my fault. I was truly astounded by his lack of shame as I gazed at him. Strive for it. I spoke again. Keep quiet. What are you fighting for? My parents are fond of my portion of what ought to have been an equal inheritance. Mom dismissed it with a wave of her hand. Oh, don't be so dramatic. We simply believed it to be logical. Jake, you don't need the money. I yelled, that's not the point. Needing the money isn't the point. It has to do with justice. It's about how you took advantage of me for years, took my time, money, and assistance, and then threw me away as if I were nothing. Regarding the one thing that ought to have been equitable, Mom's eyes blinked. We're your parents, Jake. You were raised by us. Respecting us would be the least you could do. I let out a sharp little laugh. Deference. When you treat me disrespectfully, you want respect. Ethan gave an eye roll. You're so dramatic, my God. Is this really causing you to lose your temper? You're behaving like a helpless victim who is struggling. I turned to him and spoke in a cold tone. You are truly a topic of conversation. Having a hard time. When was the last time you had to work a full-time job without your parents helping you? Oh, hold on. That's something you never have. Remove the arrogant expression from his face. However, Mom interrupted him once more before he could respond. Enough. She lost her temper. She then smoothed out her features with a deep breath. Look, Jake, I didn't want this conversation to go this way, but the truth is that your family looks out for one another. I could almost hear her setting the trap. I said, oh, without offering her anything. She let out a sigh as though she was tired of this. The mortgage is due. We were a little short this month, so I cocked my head. I was unable to resist. In fact, I laughed. Are you serious? You're still requesting money from me after everything you just said, and after standing here justifying your decisions? Mom's mouth formed a thin line. We want you to do the right thing, Jake. It was there, the manipulation, the guilt-tripping, the expectation that no matter how badly they treated me, I would still come running when they needed me. I took a deep breath, looked each of them in the eye, and said no. Mom flinched like I'd slapped her. I'm sorry, I said no. I spoke again. Steady, I'm not spending a dime. Never again, never now. Ethan whistled quietly. Whoa. So you're simply going to allow your own parents to lose their house because of a small grievance? I gazed at him. Do you also reside there? For once in your life, perhaps you should take responsibility and pay. His expression darkened. You're self-centered. Jake. But Mom wasn't finished. Jake. Her voice was dangerously low as she spoke. Is this something you truly want to do? Is money really the reason you want to leave your family? Without flinching, I looked her in the eye. That's amusing. From where I'm standing, you left me first, so I said that. She parted her lips. However, I silenced her. You made a decision. Ethan was your choice. You decided not to include me. Well, I'm making my decision now. And I decide to stop. Without saying another word, I took a step back and briefly closed the door in their faces. Silence fell. Then through the door, I heard my mother's hushed voice. Jake, this isn't over. I grinned to myself. No, it wasn't, because I had a feeling they were going to realize how much of a mess they had made. I didn't anticipate their immediate departure. When my mother believed she was due something, she was not the type to back down. Indeed. The knocking resumed less than a minute after I closed the door. Louder this time. Angrier. Jake. Mom's shrill voice could hardly be heard over the door. You're making a grave error. This is something you will regret. I pressed myself up against the door, crossed arms, hearing her tirade. I couldn't quite make out what Dad muttered, but he was always the quiet follower. Ethan, always the golden child, was probably trying to soothe her, but he was impatient. You realize what a self-centered piece of shit you are, he yelled. We looked after you for all those years. I laughed at that. I opened the door slightly again and gave him a fierce look. You looked after me. It's funny, Ethan, because I seem to recall having 2 jobs while I was in college and your parents were covering your rent. I seem to recall giving you a loan that you never returned. While you sat around doing nothing, I seem to recall helping out Mom and Dad. His arrogant face faltered, but he soon got over it. Didn't they trust me with their state after all? Perhaps you're simply upset that you didn't measure up. I took a sharp breath and clenched my jaw. That's what he desired. In order for me to appear as the villain, he wanted to irritate me, get me to react, and make me lash out. I wouldn't allow him to feel that way. I just grinned instead. Well, good luck with that estate. When you're having trouble making your mortgage payment next month, I'm sure it will be a huge help. This time I closed the door. They paused before knocking. Silence fell. Then I heard the same venom in my mother's voice, but it was lower this time. Jake, this is not over. I grinned. I muttered to myself, yes, Mom. Indeed it is. The days that followed were filled with tension. I thought they might try something like texting me in a passive-aggressive manner or involving my extended family. To my astonishment, however, nothing appeared. No emails, no calls, and no communication from anybody. It felt like the world had just changed, but I kept waiting for the other shoe to drop. I was no longer on edge all the time. I wasn't listening to my dad's feeble excuses or my mother's guilt trips. I could breathe freely for once, as if they had all disappeared. Then, 2 weeks later, I discovered a tiny envelope affixed to my front door when I returned home from work. It was white unmarked, and only my name written in my usual handwriting was on the front. I ripped it open in anticipation of something manipulative or passive-aggressive, and I was not let down. This is your last chance, Jake. For pride, you were sacrificing everything. Even though Ethan was selected to be the estate's executor, you are still related. Don't make things more difficult than they need to be. Wake up. You'll be sorry. No signature. The same old tired threats. Without a second thought, I crumpled it up and tossed it in the garbage. A couple more days went by. Then I got a second message. It wasn't a letter this time. My mother's address was the source of the email. I really thought you'd change your mind, Jake. It was you who insisted that family is the most important thing. Right now, you're ignoring us. We're having trouble. You are necessary to us. Ethan's messing things up. Let's take care of this before it's too late, please. I did feel a little something this time. Anger. They have the gall to blame their mess on me. To move that outdated card around. Family is the most important thing. I inhaled deeply after they had initially selected Ethan over me. Then, without responding, I erased the email. At that moment, I came to a realization. I was no longer angry. I had just finished. I still hadn't heard from Ethan, though. His haughtiness gave way to something more desperate, and he remained silent. I had to acknowledge that I was a little taken aback. The man who had always thought he was untouchable. Ethan was not moving. He didn't arrive at my door with an apology, which surprised me. Then my phone suddenly rang one afternoon. The number was unfamiliar, but something told me I should pick up. When I responded, it was indeed my mother's voice once more. Please, Jake. She was in tears. I was surprised when I heard it in her voice. You need to come over. Ethan's lost the house. He's messing everything up. We have nowhere to go. Please, we need you to help us. I felt nothing for the first time. No pity. Not guilty. No commitment. I almost experienced an odd feeling of relief. It was this. I had been waiting for this moment. Rather than answer right away, I waited for a moment. Over the phone, I could sense her desperation and her need for assurance that I would take over and tidy up Ethan's mess. However, I had no intention of being pulled back into that manipulative cycle. No. At last, I spoke in a calm tone. Mom, this is your problem. He's the golden child you've always desired. You now have to face the repercussions of that decision. You put him in charge of everything. You had faith in him. You can't drag me into your mess right now. She remained silent for a while, then she muttered, Please, Jake, I'm at a loss for what to do. I didn't flinch at all. My next words came out as icily as possible. Before you decided I wasn't worthy of joining the family, you ought to have considered that. The phone didn't ring for weeks after I hung up. Strangely enough, I felt better even though I didn't hear from anyone. Finally, the burden of years of manipulation and bitterness had been removed. A familiar face then appeared in the parking lot one day when I was at the store. My dad. He was carrying some bags and making his way to a dilapidated car. It had been weeks since I last saw him. I contemplated approaching him, but I had a gut feeling that there was nothing more to do. I ignored the way he called my name and simply turned away. I didn't see him again after that. So a year later, here I am. Neither Ethan nor my parents have spoken to me at all. I wonder if they're still having trouble. A part of me questions whether they ever recognized their mistakes. To be honest, though, I'm fine. Perhaps it's time for me to look after myself for once. What do you think, Reddit? Have I gone too far instead of closing them out? Should I have attempted to make things better? Tell me what you think. Story 3, Kyle is my name. I'm 33 years old, and I've traveled the same 4 hours on December 24th every year since I was old enough to drive. Christmas was a given, regardless of how hectic life got, including missed flights, breakups, and job deadlines. For the first time, I was able to persuade myself that perhaps we were still a true family, and that the dysfunction was merely noise, and there was still warmth beneath it. Continue to love. However, that illusion was shattered like glass underfoot this past year. As usual, it began with excessive planning and insufficient sleep. I'd been wrapping the presents I had carefully chosen for each child and cousin until 2 in the morning. Yes, even Laura, my sister. Toys that lit up were always my first choice. Handmade cards with gift cards inside. Small details that I recalled hearing in July. I never received anything in return from anyone. I didn't ever keep score. That wasn't why I did it. I did it because I believed that if I kept showing up, kept trying, someone would finally see me. It was a long, icy drive. The type that keeps you focused while you're holding the wheel with both hands. At 3:42 p.m., I arrived at my sister's house in time for dinner. The lights were on. There were people in the driveway. Through the shuttered windows, I could hear laughter. I smiled for a moment. It had a joyful sound. The tightness in my chest was just nerves, I told myself. After putting my jacket straight and getting out, I knocked on Laura's door. I will always remember the expression on her face. Thinly concealed behind a laugh that pierced more deeply than any insult, it was mockery rather than surprise or delight. She tilted her head as if I were a stray dog that had wandered into the wrong backyard and said, "Oh, you actually came." I blinked. I did, of course. "Last week I sent you a text. It's just for family this year," you said. She broke off smiling as if she were telling me the punchline to a joke that no one had told me. Then she leaned in a little, pulled the door halfway shut, and said, "Kyle, try to take the hint." The door then closed. As simple as that. No Christmas cheer. Don't apologize. Only me. As the muffled sounds of celebration hummed behind thick walls, I stood on a frozen porch with my arms full of gifts. I didn't knock once more. I didn't call anyone, scream, or cry. I remained motionless for a moment. I nodded to myself as if I had finally heard something that had been mumbled for years, the chill seeping into my bones. They were only being screened now. I then turned around, made my way back to my car, put the presents in the trunk with care, and turned on the ignition. My phone exploded before I had even reached the highway. The husband of Jason Morris sent a message. Why even would that loser come? I gazed at the display, frozen. Have you ever had an experience so bizarre that your brain doesn't even react at first? Perhaps it was an error, a prank, I thought. However, it was obviously intended for someone else. Also, Laura, most likely. Most likely a joke about me in a lengthy thread. At that moment, the quiet broke. Not outdoors. Inside of me, that was still the soft hum of tires on snow. In that instant, something broke. Something worn out, outdated, and overly stretched. My hands remained steady. It didn't burn my chest. I simply gave a tiny, inconspicuous smile. Because Jason must have forgotten who had been covertly paying the utilities for the past 8 months. Jason was the guy who once sobbed to me over beers after losing his job. They were able to refinance their home at a lower rate because Laura must have forgotten who co-signed the loan. They must have both assumed that I would simply continue doing it indefinitely. Without self-respect, without boundaries. They were mistaken. After parking in a gas station lot, I took out my laptop. I didn't even have to second-guess myself. I went into each account I was in charge of, including the internet, gas, and electricity. I'd even been paying for that expensive family Spotify premium. I stopped autopay and eliminated my payment methods one by one. Even the Amazon Prime account was revoked. I had shared stupidly. I then started the procedure to formally remove myself as a co-signer by opening the loan dashboard. It was in motion, but it wouldn't be simple. Now an unstoppable tide. I waited after that. My phone had 14 missed calls by the time I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment. I chose to ignore them. I warmed up some leftover Chinese food and took a long shower. I also watched a movie on Christmas Eve for the first time in years without gritting my teeth or pretending to laugh at other people's jokes. I felt calm and hollow as if my spine had grown back without my knowledge. At midnight, the calls increased. 31 and at 44. It was over 50 by 2 a.m. at 3:17 a.m. Laura's message appeared this time. Only 3 words, "We must speak." I didn't open it though, not just yet, because I wasn't rushing to fix what they broke for once. I wasn't leaping to the defense of those who had made it their custom to isolate and degrade me in the name of family. Rather, I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in hand, reflecting on all the silent times over the years when I dismissed something as a joke or brushed it off. After hearing rumors that I wasn't successful enough, manly enough, or needed, I accused myself of being overly sensitive. I was going to let them know how much they had taken me for granted, because it turned out that they were correct about one thing: I wasn't needed. The best part, though, they were unaware of the extent of my support and the extent of my remaining control. I then read her message. "We must speak. No explanation, no apology, only a request." As though I owed her access, time, or attention. I didn't respond. I honestly didn't know what to say, not out of animosity. It wouldn't sound like a scream. I required room, distance. However, more messages kept coming in even after I put my phone down and tried to close my eyes. One each from Dad and Mom. Even a vague one from Dylan, my cousin, who only texts on special occasions like birthdays or group photos. They all dance to the same tune. Light panic, vague worry. No sense of ownership at all. "Hello, dear. You left early," Laura said. "Is everything all right? Right? When you have a moment, could you give me a call? I'm not sure what's happening, but I believe Jason's phone was compromised. Just give her a call, Kyle. Christmas is here. I was never the focus, never about my feelings. Simply fix it, adjust the optics. Act as though nothing is wrong. I had played that part since I was 16. The peacemaker, the fixer. The one who understood why everyone else got to be cruel. At 6:41 a.m., the first real voicemail came in. It was Jason. "Kyle, man, take a look. That text, it wasn't meant for you. It was a joke." "Okay, just between Laura and me, you know we love you." "Come on." "And I don't know what's going on with the bills, but the gas company says the auto pay didn't go through. And Laura's mom is here and the kids are cold, man. Just, can you call me back? I didn't." I sat there and listened again. "You know we love you." That's what people say when they love the benefits, not the person. Still, I didn't feel triumphant. Not just yet. It wasn't satisfying, not at all. It felt like standing on the edge of something. Not a cliff, but a choice. I could walk back into the cycle. Play nice. Accept the half apologies and watered down lies. Or I could burn the script and finally stop pretending. I went with the latter. I took a deep breath, brewed some coffee, and opened a spreadsheet. It was time to document just how much I'd contributed. Not out of pettiness, out of clarity. I needed to see it all laid out. The mortgage, co-signing the utilities, the groceries, the Uber Eats gift cards when they just needed a little help. This week, the emergency vet visit I covered, when their dog got sick, the school supplies I bought for their oldest, the summer camp deposit I paid, and never got to thank you for. By the time I was done, the total was just over $18,000. In the last 24 months, $18,000. Quietly paid. Quietly justified. A slow bleed I hadn't even realized was happening because it always came with a, "You're the only one who understands or will pay you back once Jason's bonus hits." Or a guilt-laced, "It's just this once, we promise." That's when the real anger kicked in. Not the hot screaming kind, the cold clear kind. The kind that sharpens your thoughts into decisions. At 8:12 a.m., I finally texted Laura back 3 words. "Lose my number, no rage, no essay. Just the end of a leash," she replied instantly. "Wait, what call? Don't be dramatic. It was a misunderstood ending. You know how Jason jokes." Then a second later, "You can't seriously be mad over this. Christmas is here." I almost laughed. That was the thing. I wasn't mad anymore. I was done. I didn't respond. Instead, I called the loan servicer. I explained the situation. Asked for the co-signer release form. The woman on the line was kind, helpful, even empathetic. She told me that once I submitted proof that they had consistent income and made payments for a certain period, I could initiate the request to remove myself. It would be a process, but it was doable and it was happening. By 10:30 a.m., I'd revoked every access point. Streaming services, backup emails, joint accounts, even the DoorDash. I stupidly left logged in on their devices. Then I logged into my email and forwarded them a spreadsheet. No note, no commentary, just raw numbers. Every dollar, every date, every receipt. I labeled the document, "Financial dependency for your records." After that, I blocked them. Each and every one. Call, email, socials. Even my parents, whom I knew would eventually support Laura as they always did in awkward situations. I required tranquility. I required space. Above all, I had to quit being the family's financial and emotional slouch. I didn't stop there, though, because none of them remembered the house they lived in, and they still didn't know. Jason boasted about refinancing that one. He didn't have it. Nor was it in Laura's name. I had it. 3 years ago, after Dad lost his pension and became anxious, I had discreetly paid off the remaining balance on our parents' previous mortgage. For tax purposes, I retained the deed under a trust. Let's also be truthful, to prevent everything from disintegrating. However, Jason and Laura signed the documents without bothering to read the fine print. They only knew that the monthly payment had decreased. There was no foreclosure on the house. Uncle Kyle was also a huge help. I was done being useful now. I was prepared to remind them of whose roof they were actually standing beneath. But first I was going to wait until the calls went from desperate to frantic, just long enough to settle for the consequences. I waited because I knew them, not because I was cruel. I was familiar with their patterns and rhythms, how they turned chaos into sympathy and sympathy into power. I was aware that acting too quickly would only be interpreted as me being vindictive or harboring resentment. However, the truth would come to light if I allowed enough time for the heat to turn into desperation, for the missed payments to mount up, and for the family conversation to change from bewildered to worried. And nobody could say I was impulsive when it happened. They would recognize it as such. Repercussion. By the 27th of December, the first domino fell. Still off from work for the holidays, I was sitting on my couch. I wasn't paying much attention to a documentary halfway through. I received a message from Ashley, a high school friend of mine who had shared a screen capture of my sister, live on Facebook on her story. I increased the volume. We just had a really difficult Christmas. Laura was sitting on their couch pretending to cry in a manner that only those who practice in front of the mirror do. The children don't know why the Wi-Fi isn't working. The power company has put Jason on hold for the past 2 hours. You know it's just a lot. Additionally, family is meant to support you during difficult times. However, not every commenter has that. Hearts? Prayers? I feel sorry. I sipped some coffee. She didn't say my name once. She never once acknowledged their words or actions. There was no accountability, just pure theater, and it was effective. Gift cards and Venmo donations were being offered. Even their Amazon wishlist was requested. I saved the video, but I remained silent. December 29th, from an unidentified number, Jason called. I didn't respond. He left a voicemail 5 minutes after that. Listen, Kyle, this is getting out of control. I have no idea what you're doing or what you believe you're proving. The mortgage provider gave a call. They claimed they were unable to talk to me directly, that the listed owner is still you. Man, I thought we signed all of this more than 3 years ago. It was handled, you said. Hold on. You cannot disregard us. In the dead of winter, you're abandoning your nieces. Call me back and act like an adult. His voice practically exuded entitlement. I realized then that they didn't simply assume I wouldn't cut the power. They sincerely thought they were entitled to my name, my money, and my silence. That following everything. Since I was no longer providing for their lives, I was at fault. I checked the lease clause I had written that evening by logging into the property trust portal, but I had never included a provision allowing for the transfer or removal of tenants with a 30-day notice in the event of verbal agreement violations or abuse of occupancy. The emails agreements, and even Laura's text asking me not to let the others know I was helping with bills because she didn't want them to believe Jason couldn't provide, were all documented. Despite having both tangible and intangible receipts, I had yet to pull the last lever. I had no intention of destroying them. Retaliation for its own sake didn't interest me. All I wanted was for them to leave my life in a clear, clean manner, leaving no space for them to return. On January 2nd, that day arrived. A knock on the door of my apartment interrupted my lunch. Unexpectedly, it was Mom when I opened it. She appeared worn out. Red cheeks and puffy eyes. I assumed she was guilty because she had a paper shopping bag full of something. May I enter? I took a while to respond. Then I moved out of the way, like someone getting ready to give a speech they hadn't practiced. She sat down slowly. I remained upright. I had no idea, she started. I had no idea they were mistreating you. I had no idea you were spending so much money. I remained silent. They claimed that you had overreacted and that you were just lashing out because you were upset. I arched an eyebrow. And you think they're real? She cast her gaze downward. Initially, a protracted silence ensued. Then she included, I've been talking to your father. We sincerely apologize and acknowledge that you may require some space. I wished to believe her. Yes, I did. She then dug into the bag and gave me a little stack of envelopes, letters, children's drawings, and a handmade card from Laura that was written in glitter pen as if it were from 2005. You are missed. Please return. Kyle is being harmed by them. I let out a sigh. They certainly are. However, when they laughed in my face, they weren't in pain. When Jason referred to me as a loser, they weren't hurt. She winced. Mom, you reared her. However, I've finished raising them. She made no attempt to argue. She simply stood up after giving a slow nod. She stopped at the door on her way out. They will lose the house, you know. I gave a nod. Perhaps that's what they need to mature. She left that evening after that. I started the paperwork for eviction. Not with joy or spite, not in a fire of wrath. Just with the steady hand of someone who has been carrying a family for a long enough period of time. I gave them a whole 30 days. Legally filed it, and any outstanding payments were even waived. I had no intention of evicting them. Simply free, and perhaps free of myself as well. However, everything changed the morning after they received the notice. Jason arrived at my door at that moment silent and with red eyes. He wasn't by himself either. Jason, who had been holding the match the entire time, stood at my doorway like a man who had finally realized the house was on fire. Laura was just a few steps behind him. No makeup, no phony smile, no card of apology covered in glitter. Nothing but quiet. Her jaw was clenched, and her arms crossed as if she were biting back every word she wanted to scream, but briefly knew better. We all remained silent. Jason then let out a slow exhale. He said, "We're not here to fight, I promise." I arched an eyebrow without leaving the doorway. He glanced back at me after glancing over his shoulder at Laura, who averted her gaze. We must speak. I silently moved aside more out of interest than goodwill. With slow, heavy steps, they darted around my apartment, as if they couldn't believe I lived in a place that didn't revolve around them. They entered like yes at their own funeral. I allowed the silence to linger. I desired for them to sense it. Everything. The consequences of their decisions, the result. Catching up at last. Jason finally sat on the edge of my couch as if it might vanish beneath him and said, "We got the notice." And I simply. We were unaware of how seriously we had messed up. Just enough to say, "Go on." I gave one nod. I pondered. He tried again after breaking off. "I assumed you would be there forever." I suppose I assumed that was the case. I said, "You didn't guess. You relied on it and knew it." At last, Laura raised her head. She spoke in a tight voice. "We had no intention of pushing you away." I cocked my head. Coming from the person who slammed the door in my face, that's rich. She winced. "I assumed you would laugh it off as you usually do. Kyle, you're the one with strength." That almost made me laugh. Powerful no. I was simply worn out. I'm sick of swallowing, of being the larger individual, of being the ghost of the family. Only apparent when someone was in need of cash? A ride, a rescue. Jason bent over. "I messed up the text, look, man. I can't take it back. It was cruel. But I must tell you. I must speak it aloud. I apologize." For once, his eyes met mine. He wasn't attempting to be charming, humorous, or manipulative. He appeared to be broken. And it was because of his life's scaffolding, not because he cared about me. The one he believed I would always support had finally fallen apart. An envelope was crumpled when Laura reached into her purse. My handwriting. I sent the spreadsheet along with it. We examined everything. I had no idea how much you had accomplished. Half of those payments are beyond my memory. And since it was simpler to think you were simply doing okay, I didn't want to remember. I didn't answer. Not much could be said. In their hearts, they had known. But for years, they had put convenience ahead of morality. Laura's voice trembled a little as she said, "We spoke to the kids. We may need to relocate," I told them. "In with my parents, perhaps. Jason is taking on more work." "We're going to figure it out," she said when I asked about applying for a second job. Jason gave a nod. Pulling the plug was the right thing to do. You weren't appreciated by us. We're not here to plead with you to take back the things we used. We simply wanted to express it. They got up, I saw them make their way to the door, and Laura turned back just before they left. "Kyle, I hope you find serenity. You're worthy." Then they vanished. In my apartment, I stood by myself, allowing their words to calm me and relieving the tension in my shoulders. One inhale, one out. That was the unexpected closure. Quiet acceptance, not denial or groveling. Perhaps they were truly about to change. They might not. But since I was no longer responsible for their future, it didn't matter for once. The following 30 days went by without any problems. No outbursts, no threats of legal action, and no unexpected crises to postpone the inevitable. When Jason sent me an email asking for a move-out date, I replied with a formal acknowledgement. That was it. The property manager finally confirmed to me on January 31st that the house had been vacated. The utilities were fully transferred out of my name and the keys were returned. I spent a lot of time looking at the email. It seemed unreal. Silent sacrifice for 3 years, 18 grand. Birthdays are ignored, backhanded compliments are endured, and silent humiliations are endured. It was over now. I kept it a secret. About it I didn't post. No party was thrown by me, I just shut down my laptop. I poured a drink for myself and allowed the silence to envelop me. That weekend I took a short trip to the coast. By themselves. No itinerary, no guilt. I walked along the sand, let the wind on my face, and sat by the cliffs. With a journal I hadn't looked at in a long time. "You can stop attempting to earn love that ought to have been given freely," I wrote down. I wasn't prepared for that line to hit so hard. I received a card in the mail 3 months later. No address for return. A picture of my nieces holding a sign was inside. Uncle Kyle, thank you. You are missed. Beneath it was a note written in Laura's hand. We're all right. Not flawless, but passable. We appreciate you making us mature. Always love, even if it's from afar. I smiled, but I didn't cry. Confrontation doesn't always lead to closure. Sometimes it comes from letting go and realizing that you are no longer responsible. After putting the card in a drawer, I returned to my normal life. My new life. One with distinct lines. One in which my worth was independent of my financial situation and my capacity for perseverance. And I never again spent hours driving for Christmas. I stayed at home that year and was in the right place.